The snow fell in silence across the Montana Valley, blanketing everything in white forgetting. Benjamin Ashford watched through the cabin window as the last light drained from the winter sky, his hands still covered in sawdust from the day's work. The chess piece he'd been carving lay unfinished on the workbench, a knight frozen mid-gallop in cherry wood. He'd started it 3 weeks ago, or maybe it was 4. Time moved differently when you had nothing but time. 68 years old, and the calendar felt like a prison sentence counting down to nothing. He brushed the dust from his palms and crossed to the kitchen, his joints protesting the cold. The coffee maker gurgled, the only voice in the house besides his own. Margaret used to say he worked in silence because words required a kind of presence he couldn't afford to give. She'd been right about that. She'd been right about most things. The photograph on the mantel showed her smiling, 30 years younger, standing beside him at the Mars Colony groundbreaking ceremony. He'd been so proud that day, so certain his legacy would be written in the red dust of another planet. Now those structures stood empty half the time, retrofitted by engineers who thought his designs were quaint relics of early colonial ambition. Benjamin poured coffee into a chipped NASA mug and sat at the table where he ate every meal alone. The radio crackled to life on the counter, tuned to the news station out of Billings. He barely listened anymore. Wars and markets and political theater, all of it happening to other people in other lives. But tonight something in the announcer's tone made him look up. In breaking news from the Mars Colonial Authority, Phase 3 expansion is now complete, utilizing revolutionary atmospheric processors that will triple oxygen production by next quarter. Chief Engineer Davies credited the success to improvements on original infrastructure designs from the colony's founding era. Improvements. Benjamin set down the mug carefully, precisely, the way he did everything. They'd improved his work, smoothed out the rough edges, made it better. He should have felt pride. Instead, he felt the peculiar emptiness of a man whose purpose had outlived him. The phone rang, shattering the quiet. He considered not answering. It would be Rachel, his daughter, calling from Washington with another invitation he'd decline. Another plea for him to stop hiding in the mountains. Another conversation that would end with both of them pretending the silence between them didn't ache. But he answered anyway, because even painful connection was better than none. "Dad," Rachel's voice carried that particular blend of love and frustration he'd learned to recognize. "Did you get my message about Thanksgiving?" "I did." "And?" "Rachel, we've been through this." A sigh traveled 2,000 miles through fiber optic cables. "It's been 3 years, Dad. Mom wouldn't want you living like this." The words hung between them, true and terrible. Margaret wouldn't have wanted this. But Margaret also wouldn't have died alone while her husband stood on Mars convincing himself the mission timeline couldn't be adjusted. Some failures you don't recover from. You just learn to carry them. "I appreciate the invitation," he said quietly, "but I'm fine here." "You're not fine. You're hiding." "Maybe I've earned the right to hide." Another sigh, heavier this time. "I have to go, staff meeting in 10 minutes, but Dad, please think about it. The kids miss you, I miss you." "I know, I'll think about it." They both knew he wouldn't. After she hung up, Benjamin stood at the window watching night claim the valley completely. The first stars emerged, cold and distant. He'd spent his career building bridges between worlds, but couldn't build one across the dinner table to his own daughter. Some ironies were too perfect to be accidental. He turned back to the workbench, to the unfinished night, to the careful, methodical work that kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. Outside, the northern lights began to shimmer across the horizon, faint green curtains dancing over the mountains. Beautiful and meaningless, like everything else. Then the lights changed. It happened slowly at first, a brightening that seemed natural, an intensification of the aurora's glow. But within seconds, the entire sky ignited. Brilliant cascades of color, green and blue and gold, flooded across the heavens with an intensity that turned night into day. Benjamin stepped back from the window, his heart suddenly loud in his chest. This wasn't natural. The radio erupted into static. The television in the corner flickered, died, then blazed back to life, showing nothing but white noise and a high-pitched tone that made his teeth ache. His cell phone vibrated on the table, the screen flashing a sequence of numbers. Primes. All of them prime numbers, cascading down the display in perfect order. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Benjamin's hands trembled as he picked up the phone. The numbers continued. 17, 19, 23, 29. Someone was counting. Someone was speaking in the oldest language humans knew, the pure mathematics that transcended culture and biology. Someone was saying hello. And they were saying it here, to this valley, to this cabin, to him. The phone stopped on 41 and went dark. The television cut to black. The radio died mid-static. Outside, the aurora dimmed to normal winter phosphorescence, as if the universe had exhaled and returned to sleep. Benjamin stood in the sudden silence, his engineer's mind racing through explanations. Solar flare, atmospheric anomaly, equipment malfunction, but engineers didn't believe in coincidence, and the prime sequence was no accident. That was a message. That was contact. The phone rang again. Normal this time, Rachel's number on the display. "Dad," her voice was sharp, urgent. "Dad, are you seeing this?" I saw lights. The electronics went haywire. It's not just Montana. It's everywhere. The entire northern hemisphere just lit up like a Christmas tree. And Dad, the signal, they're saying it was targeted. Focused. Focused where? A pause. He could hear voices in the background, urgent and overlapping. "Dad, I need you to stay calm. I need you to listen to me very carefully." The signal, whatever it was, it originated from orbit, from something that's been sitting above Earth for the past 6 months. And Dad, it wasn't broadcasting. It was narrowcasting, to a specific location. Benjamin's mouth went dry. "Where?" "Montana, your valley. They're saying whoever sent it, they asked for you, by name." The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. He was nobody. A retired engineer living in self-imposed exile, carving chess pieces and counting down to irrelevance. Why would anyone ask for him, let alone someone capable of turning the sky into a billboard? That's impossible. I'm looking at the data right now. The UN Xenobiology Division has been tracking this thing since August. They've been trying to establish communication, but it's been silent. Until tonight. Until it sent a message in prime numbers followed by your name, your date of birth, and your genetic signature. My genetic signature. From your medical file on Mars. Dad, they pulled your DNA profile from the colonial database. This thing, whatever it is, it knows exactly who you are. Through the window, he could see headlights cutting through the darkness, multiple vehicles climbing the mountain road toward his cabin. Fast. Official. "Rachel, I need to go." "Don't hang up. They're coming for you. Military transport, probably. I pulled some strings, made some calls. I'm listed as your primary contact for xenobiological consultation. That means I get to come with you." "Come with me where?" "New York, UN headquarters. You're about to have a very interesting conversation with something that isn't human." The vehicles were closer now, 3 black SUVs with government plates. Benjamin watched them approach with the strange detachment of a man whose life had just pivoted on an axis he didn't know existed. "I'm 68 years old," he said quietly. I build things, I don't do first contact. Apparently someone thinks you do. Rachel's voice softened. Dad, I know you want to hide. I know you think you've earned the right to disappear. But this, whatever this is, it chose you. Maybe it's time to stop running. The SUVs pulled up outside. Doors opened. Men in dark suits emerged, breath misting in the cold. One of them carried a tablet, checking the screen, confirming the location. They moved with the efficient precision of people following orders they didn't fully understand. I have to go, Benjamin said. I'll meet you in New York, 12 hours. Don't do anything stupid. When have I ever? Do you want the list chronologically or alphabetically? Despite everything, he almost smiled. See you in 12 hours. The knock came firm and professional. Benjamin opened the door to find a woman in her 40s, dark suit, tired eyes, holding a badge that identified her as Agent Morrison, Department of Defense. Dr. Ashford, I apologize for the late visit. I'm going to need you to come with us. Am I under arrest? No, sir. You're being requested for consultation on a matter of national security. Actually, international security. Actually, we're not entirely sure what kind of security, but people much smarter than me said to bring you in immediately. He looked past her at the waiting vehicles, at the armed men standing at careful intervals, at the sky where the aurora had returned to its normal dance. Give me 5 minutes to pack. You have 3. He packed the essentials, clothes, toiletries, the photograph of Margaret. At the last second, he grabbed the unfinished chess piece and dropped it in his pocket. Something to do with his hands, something to remind him of normal. The drive down the mountain happened in silence. Agent Morrison sat beside him in the back seat, occasionally checking her phone, occasionally glancing at him as if trying to reconcile the old man in work shirt and jeans with whatever file she'd been given. Can I ask what you built on Mars? She said finally. Most of it, the habitat domes, the power grid, the water reclamation systems. They say those structures will outlast the colony itself. That was the idea. So you build things that last. I used to. She nodded slowly, processing. Maybe that's why they want you. They. But she just shook her head and returned to her phone. The private airfield outside Billings was lit up like a surgery theater. A military transport waited on the tarmac, engines already warming. They rushed him through security, onto the plane, into a seat beside a window that showed nothing but darkness and his own reflection. Rachel called as they reached cruising altitude. I'm on a plane from D.C. We'll land around the same time. Dad, I've been reading the briefing files. This is bigger than they're telling you. How big? The ship in orbit, it's massive, 3 kilometers long. Organic architecture, if that makes sense. Like it was grown instead of built. And Dad, it's old. Spectral analysis suggests the hull materials are over 10,000 years old. Benjamin closed his eyes, trying to process. 10,000 years. Humans were still painting on cave walls 10,000 years ago. What do they want? We don't know. The message was just your name and a request for architectural consultation. And one other thing. What? A compensation offer. They're offering payment for your services. Payment in what? I don't think I can spend alien currency at the grocery store. Rachel's voice went quiet. Extended lifespan, that's what the message said. Architectural consultation in exchange for extended lifespan. They didn't specify how extended. The words settled over him like snow. Extended lifespan. At 68, with a heart condition his doctor said would give him maybe another decade if he was lucky, the offer should have sounded like salvation. Instead, it sounded like a question he wasn't ready to answer. What would he even do with more time? I need to go, Rachel said. Landing in 20 minutes, see you on the ground. The phone went dark. Benjamin sat in the humming silence of the transport, surrounded by soldiers who wouldn't meet his eyes, hurtling toward a meeting that shouldn't be possible. Through the window, stars wheeled overhead, infinite and indifferent. Somewhere up there, something waited for him. He pulled the unfinished chess piece from his pocket and turned it in his hands. The night, frozen in motion, going somewhere but never arriving. He understood the feeling. New York appeared below them as the sun rose, a concrete forest catching gold light. The transport descended toward a private facility adjacent to UN headquarters, where more dark SUVs waited, and more efficient people rushed him through checkpoints and security scanners and biometric verification that confirmed he was exactly who he claimed to be. Rachel met him in a white corridor that smelled of disinfectant and fear. She looked older than her 39 years, worry written in the lines around her eyes. But she hugged him, hard and quick, before stepping back to professional distance. They've set up a briefing room, 20 people who all think they're in charge. I got you clearance to attend as primary consultant. What am I consulting on? That's the question nobody can answer. She gestured down the corridor. Come on, they're waiting. The briefing room was exactly what he expected. Long table, too many screens, too many people in suits and uniforms trying to look competent while dealing with the incomprehensible. A general whose name tag read Patterson stood at the head of the table, organizing files with the aggressive precision of someone who needed control. Dr. Ashford, thank you for coming on such short notice. Patterson gestured to a seat. I'll skip the pleasantries. 6 months ago, an object entered Earth orbit. We tracked it from deep space, tried to establish communication, got nothing. Then last night it broadcast a signal that lit up the northern hemisphere and asked for you specifically. So here's my question. Why you? Benjamin sat slowly, feeling every one of his 68 years. I have no idea. You have no previous contact with unidentified phenomena, no unusual experiences, no reason an alien intelligence would know your name. I'm a retired engineer. I built things on Mars. That's the extent of my qualifications. A woman across the table, Dr. Chen, according to her nameplate, leaned forward. The ship transmitted your genetic signature, Dr. Ashford. DNA sequence pulled from medical records stored in the Mars Colonial Database. That suggests either surveillance going back years or access to our secure networks that we can't explain. Or, Rachel interjected, they've been watching longer than 6 months. The room went quiet. Patterson pulled up an image on the main screen. The alien vessel hung against the black, a massive organic sculpture that looked more like a deep-sea creature than a spaceship. Sweeping curves and bioluminescent patterns, beautiful and utterly wrong. We're calling it the Twilight Sovereign, Patterson said. Based on markings we've managed to translate. It's been dormant for 6 months. Now it wants to talk, to you. The question is whether we let that happen. You think it's dangerous? Benjamin asked. I think anything with the technology to cross interstellar space and the patience to wait 6 months is dangerous by definition. But I also think we're not in a position to refuse. So here's what's going to happen. You're going up to the ISS. We've arranged a shuttle departure in 6 hours. The Twilight Sovereign has agreed to dock at the international facility. You'll meet whoever or whatever is on board, you'll find out what they want, and you'll report back. Rachel goes with you, as xenobiology liaison. Benjamin looked at his daughter. She nodded once firm. And if I refuse? He asked. Patterson smiled without warmth. Then we're all probably dead by Tuesday. The ship's weapons systems, if they are weapons systems, make our entire nuclear arsenal look like firecrackers. So please don't refuse." 6 hours later, Benjamin sat in a shuttle cabin watching Earth recede below. Rachel sat beside him, reviewing files on a tablet, occasionally glancing at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Worry, maybe, or fear, or something that looked like hope. "You didn't have to come," he said. "Yes, I did. Someone needs to make sure you don't accidentally start an interstellar war." "I've never started a war." "There's a first time for everything." She set down the tablet. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When Mom died, why didn't you come home?" The question hung in the recycled air between them. He'd known it was coming for 3 years. Didn't make it easier to answer. "I was on Mars. Critical phase of the atmospheric processor installation. They needed me." "We needed you." "I know." "Then why?" Benjamin looked out the window at the curve of the planet, at the fragile blue membrane of atmosphere that made life possible. "Because I was a coward. Because if I came home, I'd have to face what I'd done. All the missed birthdays and school plays and bedtime stories. All the times I chose work over family. If I came home, I'd have to admit I'd failed at the one thing that mattered more than all the structures I'd ever built." Rachel's hand found his, squeezed once. "You didn't fail, Dad. You were absent, that's different." "Is it?" "I'm still here, aren't I? Still trying. That has to count for something." He squeezed back, grateful and ashamed in equal measure. "It counts for everything." The ISS loomed ahead, a gleaming construct of human ambition and cooperation, dwarfed by the twilight sovereign that hung beyond it. The alien ship filled the viewport, massive and patient, waiting. The docking procedure took 40 minutes. The walk from the shuttle to the ISS observation deck took 10. And then Benjamin stood at the reinforced window, staring at the vessel that had called him across half a planet, and felt his heart hammer against his ribs. A smaller craft detached from the Twilight Sovereign, elegant and swift, closing the distance. It docked with the ISS with a precision that suggested centuries of practice. Airlocks cycled. Atmosphere equalized. Warning lights shifted from red to green. Patterson's voice crackled through the comm system. "Dr. Ashford, they're requesting you enter alone. Rachel stays in the observation deck." Benjamin looked at his daughter. She nodded, trying to look brave. "Alone," he confirmed and walked toward the airlock. The corridor beyond was unlike anything in his experience. Walls that seemed to breathe, patterns of light pulsing beneath translucent surfaces in rhythms that suggested living tissue. The temperature was precisely comfortable, the air rich with oxygen and something else, something that tasted like ozone and starlight. 2 figures waited at the far end. Tall, easily 7 feet, humanoid but not human. Their skin held a faint luminescence, patterns like circuit boards traced in blue light beneath the surface. They wore no clothing, but their bodies suggested ceremonial armor grown instead of forged. Guards, Benjamin realized. He was being escorted. They gestured forward, silent. He followed, his footsteps making no sound on the organic floor. They led him through passages that curved and branched like blood vessels, past chambers filled with technology he couldn't begin to understand, until finally they reached a doorway that opened onto something impossible. The throne room was carved from light itself, or so it seemed. Crystalline walls refracted colors that didn't exist in human spectrum. The ceiling soared overhead, lost in shadows and stars that might have been real or might have been projection. And at the center, on a throne that floated without visible support, sat a woman who made his breath catch. She was beautiful, but not in the way young things are beautiful. This was the beauty of autumn, of late sunlight through old windows, of weathered stone that has stood against centuries. Her skin held that same subtle glow as the guards, bronze touched with gold. Hair the color of silver and wheat fell past her shoulders, shot through with highlights that moved like living flame. Her eyes, when they opened, were deep amber flecked with gold, ancient and tired and somehow still warm. She looked perhaps 45, by human standards. But Benjamin had spent enough time reading alien anatomy files in the past 6 hours to know appearances meant nothing. The guards withdrew. The door sealed behind them with a whisper like a sigh. The woman stood slowly, as if the act required effort, and descended from the throne. She moved with careful grace, each step deliberate. As she approached, Benjamin could see the faint crystallization creeping along her collarbone, geometric patterns spreading beneath her skin like frost on glass. She was dying. Whatever she was dying. Benjamin Ashford. Her voice was low, musical, touched with an accent that suggested languages older than human speech. Forgive me for not greeting you properly. Standing has become difficult. I don't know the proper greeting, he admitted. We're kind of making this up as we go. The faintest smile touched her lips. Honesty, how refreshing. I am Kalara Vishen, Empress of the Andromeda Ascendancy, though the title means less with each passing year. Your Majesty. He sketched something that might have been a bow, feeling ridiculous and odd in equal measure. Please, just Kalara. Formality seems wasteful when time is short. She gestured to a bench that grew from the floor like a mushroom, organic and solid. Sit. I'm told humans find standing uncomfortable after a certain age. He sat, grateful. She settled beside him, close enough that he could see the delicate tracery of light beneath her skin, the way her breath came measured and careful. You're wondering why I asked for you, she said. Among other questions, yes. You built structures on Mars that will outlast the colony itself, perhaps outlast Mars entirely. The Val's Marineris habitat dome, yes, designed to withstand 300 years of solar radiation, dust storms, and geological stress. 350, actually. 350, she nodded slowly. You understand impermanence, Dr. Ashford. You build knowing that everything crumbles eventually. That wisdom, that acceptance, is rare among your kind, rarer still among mine. I'm not sure I'd call it wisdom, more like pragmatism. Call it what you like, I need it. She stood again, moving to a window that showed Earth hanging below, blue and white and impossibly fragile. My people are dying. Not from war or disease, but from something more insidious. We've lost the ability to reproduce. Our last natural birth was 6 centuries ago. We've tried cloning, genetic manipulation, consciousness transfer. Nothing works. We're not going extinct. We're fading. Benjamin watched her reflection in the crystalline wall, saw the weight she carried in the set of her shoulders. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what that has to do with me. I don't want you to save my people, Dr. Ashford. It's too late for that. What I need is for you to build something that will outlast us. A memory. An archive of everything we were, everything we knew, everything we loved. So that when the last of us crystallizes and fades, the universe will remember the Andromeda ascendancy existed. She turned to face him, and he saw tears tracking down her face, glowing faintly in the dim light. I need you to build me forever. The words settled over him like snow, beautiful and terrible. He thought of the structures on Mars, designed to outlast their purpose. Thought of Margaret's grave in Montana, where no monument would last more than a few centuries. Thought of his own approaching mortality and the question that had haunted him since her death. What remains when we're gone? You said you were offering compensation, he said quietly. Extended lifespan. Genetic therapy. Our medical technology can reverse cellular aging, repair DNA damage, extend your functional years considerably. You could live another 50 years, perhaps more. long enough to see your great-grandchildren grow old. 50 years. He'd be 118, older than anyone in recorded history. The thought should have thrilled him. Instead, it felt like looking at a vast, empty plain stretching to a horizon he'd never reach. And if I refuse? Kilara returned to the bench, sitting heavily. Then I will find another architect. It may take years, years I don't have. And when I die, the barrier that protects 7 solar systems from invasion will collapse, your Earth included, so please don't refuse. That's not really a choice. No, it's not. I'm sorry for that. She looked at him with those ancient amber eyes. But I'm asking anyway, will you help me? Benjamin thought of Rachel waiting in the observation deck, thought of the unfinished chess piece in his pocket, thought of Margaret saying he worked in silence because words required presence he couldn't give. Here was a chance to be present, to build something that mattered in a way Mars never would, to look mortality in the face and say, I was here, and what I made will prove it. Yes, he said simply, I'll help you. The relief that crossed Kilara's face was profound, transforming her from ancient empress to something vulnerable and human. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I think I'm starting to. She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm, slightly cooler than human baseline, and where they touched he felt a faint vibration, like a tuning fork struck just beyond hearing. We should discuss terms, timeline, resources. But first, let me ask you something, Benjamin Ashford, and please be honest. All right. Why did you say yes? Really? Not because of Earth, not because of threats or consequences. Why? He looked down at their joined hands, his weathered and scarred from decades of work, hers glowing faintly with patterns that pulsed in time with her heart. Because I'm 68 years old and I've spent the last 3 years carving chess pieces in Montana, because I was too much of a coward to face my failures, because my wife died while I was on Mars and I never got to say goodbye, because my daughter invited me to Thanksgiving and I was going to say no, again, because it's easier to hide than to be present, and because you're asking me to build something that will last, which is the only thing I've ever been good at. So yes, I'll help you. Not because I'm noble, because I'm tired of being alone with my regrets. Kilara's fingers tightened on his. Then we're well matched. I've been alone with mine for 1,200 years. 1,200. Give or take a decade. Time moves differently when you've lived several lifetimes. She smiled sadly. You'll understand if you accept the therapy. That's a long time to be alone. Longer than you can imagine. But tonight, for the first time in 50 years, I don't feel alone. They sat in silence, watching Earth turn below, 2 beings from different worlds united by the simple, terrible understanding that nothing lasts and everything ends. But perhaps, with enough care and skill and stubborn hope, something could be built that would outlive the builders. Benjamin thought of the chess piece in his pocket, the knight frozen mid-gallop. Maybe it was time to finish it. Maybe it was time to finish a lot of things. When do we start? He asked. Kilara stood, offering her hand. Now, if you're willing, I can show you the archive chamber, explain what I need. It will take months to complete, perhaps a year. You'll need to live here on the Twilight Sovereign. Your daughter can visit, but the work requires focus. He took her hand and stood, feeling the ache in his knees, the weight of years. Soon that would change. Soon he'd be young again, in body if not in spirit. The thought terrified him. One condition, he said. Name it. I need to call Rachel first. Tell her myself. She's waited long enough for me to stop running. Kilara nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. I've waited this long, I can wait a few more hours. But as they walked toward the communications chamber, Benjamin realized he'd already made his choice the moment he saw her tears. The moment he recognized in her the same desperate loneliness he'd been carrying since Margaret died. Some connections transcend species. Some understandings need no translation. And sometimes the most important structures you build aren't made of steel and stone, but of presence and choice, and the courage to say yes when every instinct screams to run. The universe, he thought, had a strange sense of humor. It had taken an alien empress dying at the far edge of her impossibly long life to remind him how to live. He pulled out his phone, Rachel's number already queued, and thought about what he'd say. How do you tell your daughter you're leaving Earth to build a monument for a civilization that's fading into memory? How do you explain that sometimes redemption comes from the strangest places? But as he hit dial, watching Kaylara's luminescent patterns pulse steady and strong in the dim light, he realized Rachel would understand. She'd been asking him to be present for 3 years. Finally, impossibly, he was ready to try. The conversation with Rachel lasted 20 minutes, though it felt like seconds and hours simultaneously. Benjamin stood in the communications chamber, watching his daughter's face on the holographic display, seeing her cycle through disbelief, fear, anger, and finally something that looked like reluctant acceptance. 6 months, she said for the 3rd time. You're staying on an alien ship for 6 months. Maybe longer. The project timeline depends on how quickly I can master their technology. Kaylara's physicians estimate she has approximately 8 months before the crystallization becomes critical. We're working against that deadline. Rachel's expression shifted to concern. 8 months, and if you don't finish in time. Then the archive remains incomplete, and a civilization's entire history disappears when she dies. The barrier network that protects 7 solar systems, including Earth, destabilizes without an empress to maintain it. We have perhaps a year after that before hostile species invade. He paused, letting the weight settle. So no pressure. Dad, you have a heart condition. You're 68 years old. What if something happens to you? Their medical technology is centuries ahead of ours. The genetic therapy they're offering could extend my life by 50 years and reverse my heart damage completely. I'll probably be safer up here than in Montana. She rubbed her eyes, exhausted. Behind her, through the window of the ISS observation deck, Earth turned in silent majesty. This isn't about safety. This is about you running again. Different mountain, same hiding. The accusation stung because it was partially true, but only partially. Maybe, he admitted, but maybe it's also about building something that matters, one last time, before I'm too old to hold the tools. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Mom would have supported this. You know that, right? She always said your problem wasn't the work. It was that you never let anyone share it with you. I'm trying to be better. I know, that's why I'm not stopping you. She leaned closer to the camera. But Dad, promise me something. When this is done, when you've built your monument for the dying empress, come home. Really come home. To Thanksgiving, to birthdays, to Sunday dinners. Deal. Deal. And Dad, don't fall in love with an alien. That's where I draw the line. He laughed despite himself. I'll do my best. After the call ended, Kaylara appeared in the doorway, moving with that careful grace that spoke of pain held at bay. Your daughter is protective. She has reason to be. I haven't given her much cause to trust my judgment. Yet she let you stay. That speaks to faith, not judgment. Kaylara gestured down the corridor. Come, I want to show you the archive chamber. We should begin planning immediately. As I told your daughter, my physicians estimate 8 months before the crystallization reaches my brain stem. After that, I'll lose cognitive function. We need the archive framework completed before then. They walked through passages that seemed to breathe, walls pulsing with data flow. Information moving through living conduits, organic and efficient in ways human technology couldn't match. 8 months, Benjamin repeated, filing the timeline away in his engineer's mind. That's not much time to build something meant to last forever. Which is why I need the human who designed structures on Mars to survive 350 years. You think in deep time, Benjamin. That's rarer than you know. They descended a spiral ramp that seemed to grow downward as they walked, the ship reconfiguring itself around their presence. Benjamin had spent decades working with smart materials and adaptive architecture, but this was something else entirely. This was technology so advanced it felt like magic. "How does your species achieve this?" he asked, running his hand along the wall. It was warm, responsive, almost affectionate. "Ships that grow, buildings that think." "We stopped drawing lines between biology and technology about 8,000 years ago. Why build when you can grow? Why program when you can teach?" She smiled faintly. "Your people will get there eventually. You're already experimenting with bioengineering, neural networks, adaptive materials. Give it a few centuries. Assuming we don't blow ourselves up first." "There is that risk, though I have hope for humanity. You're reckless and passionate and short-lived, which means you burn very bright. That brightness, it's beautiful to watch." The ramp opened onto a vast chamber that stole Benjamin's breath. The space was easily the size of a cathedral, but instead of pews and altars, it held something that looked like a massive crystal tree. Branches of pure light spread upward and outward, each one pulsing with colors that shifted through spectrums he had no names for. At the base, a control interface grew from the floor, organic controls that responded to touch and thought in equal measure. "This is the archive core," Kalara said softly. "Or it will be once you help me complete it. Right now it's just potential, beautiful potential but empty." Benjamin approached slowly, his engineer's eye cataloging details. The structure was quantum-based, he could tell that much. Information stored not in binary but in superposition, allowing for infinite layering of data. But it was incomplete, the upper branches ending in jagged fragments, the lower roots disconnected from the ship's main systems. "What happened here?" "I started building it 50 years ago after my husband died. Thuron was the last person who truly understood me. When he was gone, I realized the ascendancy would follow soon after, so I began this. A way to preserve everything we were." Her voice cracked slightly. "But I'm not an architect, Benjamin. I'm a leader, a warrior, a scholar. I know what I want this to be, but not how to make it real. That's where you come in." He walked around the structure, hands hovering near the light branches, not quite touching. The quantum engineering was exquisite but flawed. Whoever had designed this understood the theory but not the practical application. It was like watching a brilliant composer try to build a piano. They knew the music, but not the instrument. "You need more than an architect," he said finally. "You need someone who understands how consciousness translates to data, how memory becomes structure. I'm not sure I'm qualified." "You built habitats that anticipated human needs before the colonists knew they had them. The Val's Marineris dome, it doesn't just shelter people. It comforts them. The light angles, the acoustic design, the flow of spaces. You built psychology into physics. That's what I need. Not just storage, but meaning." Benjamin turned to face her. In the glow of the incomplete archive, her crystallization was more visible, geometric patterns spreading like frost across her collarbone and up her neck. Beautiful and terrible. "This will take months. Close collaboration. I'll need access to your memories, your history, everything you want preserved. That level of intimacy between two people who barely know each other, it's going to be difficult." "I know, but I'm willing if you are." He thought of Margaret, of the intimacy they'd built over 30 years of marriage, slowly and with great difficulty because he'd never been good at opening up. This would be different. Faster. A compression of decades into months. The thought terrified him. But he'd promised Rachel he'd try. All right, let's start with the basics. I need to understand your people's history, culture, values. The archive isn't just a database, it's a story, and every story needs structure. Kalera's smile was radiant with relief. Thank you, truly. I know this asks much of you. It asks everything, but maybe that's what I need. They worked through the night, though night and day had no meaning on the Twilight Sovereign. Kalera taught Benjamin the interface, showing him how to navigate the quantum architecture with thought and touch combined. He learned quickly, his engineer's mind adapting to the organic logic that governed Andromeda technology. She shared the first memories around dawn by Earth time. Historical records mostly, the founding of the Ascendancy 10,000 years ago when 3 species discovered they shared compatible quantum frequencies and could merge their civilizations without losing individual identity. Benjamin watched through the archive interface as ancient beings, some humanoid, some decidedly not, came together in a ceremony of light and consciousness. We called it the resonance, Kalera explained, her voice soft with memory. The moment when separate notes become harmony, it defined our culture. Everything we built together. Every decision required consensus across all 3 species. It made us slow but thorough, patient but wise. What happened to the other 2 species? Her expression dimmed. The Vexter faded 600 years ago, genetic drift they couldn't correct. The Lumini followed 3 centuries later. Now only Andromeda remain, and we're following the same path. Something in our biology, some shared vulnerability we never identified. We thought we'd have time to solve it. You never have as much time as you think. No, you don't. The days blurred together into a rhythm of work and conversation. Benjamin rose early, or what passed for early on a ship without circadian cycles, and spent 12 hours in the archive chamber. He made steady progress, completing perhaps 5% of the total structure each week. By the end of the first month, the archive framework was 20% complete, the quantum branches extending further, more stable, better integrated with the ship's systems. Kalera joined him each evening, after attending to the administrative duties of an empress whose empire was slowly dying. They would review the day's progress, make adjustments, and then she would share more memories. At first, they were formal, historical. The great wars of the 3rd millennium, the discovery of faster-than-light travel, the establishment of the barrier that protected 7 solar systems from the hostile species beyond. But gradually, as the work progressed and trust built between them, the memories became personal. 3 weeks into the project, Kalera shared her wedding day. Benjamin sat at the interface while the memory played out in holographic detail around them. Young Kalera, appearing perhaps 25 by human standards, standing in a hall of living light beside Thuron Vishen. The Emperor was tall and powerfully built, with the same bioluminescent patterns as his bride, but in shades of deep blue rather than gold. They performed the bonding ceremony, consciousness temporarily merging so each could know the other completely. It's beautiful, Benjamin said quietly as the memory faded. How long were you married? 817 years. He died in the Battle of the Void Rift, holding the barrier against an invasion that would have shattered 7 systems. He bought us another 1,000 years of peace with his sacrifice. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I was on the homeworld when it happened. Felt him die through our bond. That's the curse of Andromeda marriage. You're never truly separate, which means you never truly heal when they're gone. Margaret and I were married for 30 years. That felt like forever and not nearly long enough at the same time. Tell me about her. So he did. Shared memories of a woman who had loved him despite his flaws, who had built a life around his absences, and forgiven him more times than he deserved. He told Kalara about the arguments, the reconciliations, the quiet Sunday mornings that had seemed ordinary at the time, but now felt like paradise lost. "I was on Mars when she died," he said, the words coming easier than they had in years. "Stage 4 cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months, she made it 7. She asked me to come home. I said I would after the critical phase of the atmospheric processor installation. I thought I had time. Then I got the message that she'd passed. 22-minute delay from Earth to Mars. I stood there reading it over and over, doing the math. She'd been gone for 22 minutes and I hadn't even known. Hadn't felt it. That's when I realized our bond was never as strong as I'd told myself it was." Kalara reached across the interface and took his hand. The contact sent a faint vibration through his arm, that quantum resonance he'd felt before, slightly stronger now. The strength of a bond isn't measured in mystical connection. It's measured in choice. You chose her every day for 30 years. That she wanted you there at the end, that speaks to what you built together. "I failed her when it mattered most." "You failed once. That doesn't erase the 1,000 times you succeeded." She squeezed his hand gently. "I've spent 50 years mourning Thuron. 50 years feeling guilty that I survived when he didn't. Guilty that I'm relieved the pain will finally end. If I've learned anything, it's that we torture ourselves far more than we deserve." They sat in silence, hands joined, two wounded people offering comfort they couldn't quite give themselves. The archive pulsed around them, slowly filling with the memories and histories of two civilizations separated by light years, but united in the simple truth that loss is universal and grief knows no species. By the end of the second month, the archive had reached 40% completion. Benjamin had lost 15 pounds he couldn't afford to lose, but gained an understanding of quantum architecture that would have earned him a dozen doctorates if anyone on Earth could comprehend what he was learning. The framework was taking shape, branches extending upward in fractal patterns that encoded information in layers of increasing complexity. But more than the work, he'd gained something unexpected: friendship. Kalara visited the archive chamber every evening without fail. What had started as professional consultation had evolved into companionship. They talked about everything: philosophy and poetry, engineering and art, the nature of consciousness, and the best way to prepare tea. Benjamin found himself looking forward to her arrival, found himself working faster during the day so they'd have more time to simply talk. He didn't examine the feeling too closely, didn't want to name it. Rachel called weekly from Earth, monitoring his health through the medical data the ship transmitted. The news was concerning. His heart condition was worsening under the stress of the work environment and alien atmosphere, despite the ship's best efforts to accommodate human biology. "You need to start the genetic therapy," she said during their 8th week call. "The Andromeda physicians are recommending immediate intervention. Your ejection fraction is down to 30%. Dad, that's heart failure territory." "The archive is only 40% complete. I can't take 3 days off for the procedure." "You're no good to anyone dead. And at the rate you're going, you've got maybe 2 weeks before your heart gives out completely." He knew she was right, had known for 2 weeks as the chest pains increased and the shortness of breath became constant. But accepting the therapy felt like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. Once he did this, he wouldn't be fully human anymore. The treatment would reverse his aging, but it would also alter his DNA in subtle ways, make him compatible with Andromeda biology. He'd be something else, something new. "I'll think about it," he said. "Think fast. The doctors give you 2 weeks, maybe 3. After the call ended, Benjamin sat in his small quarters staring at his reflection. 68 years of life written in the lines of his face, the gray of his hair, the spots on his hands. All of it about to be erased, rewound, made young again. He should have been excited. Instead, he felt like he was erasing evidence of a life lived, mistakes and all. A soft knock at the door. Kilara's voice gentle. "May I come in?" He opened the door to find her leaning against the frame, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. The crystallization had spread further in recent weeks, advancing faster than her physicians had predicted. What should have been 8 months was accelerating. She had perhaps 6 months now, maybe less. The patterns crept up her neck toward her jaw, geometric and beautiful and terrifying. "Rachel told you," he said. "The medical staff informed me. Benjamin, you have to start the therapy. I can't lose you, not when we're so close." "I'm not sure I want to be young again. Being old, it's honest. It shows what you've been through. Youth feels like lying." She stepped into the room, moved to the window where Earth hung in the distance like a blue jewel. "I was young once. 800 years ago, I would have given anything to age, to show the marks of experience. Now I'm dying, and all I can think is how much I'd give for another decade of this worn-out body." She turned to face him. "Don't waste the gift because you think suffering makes you noble. Accept it. Finish the work. Then go home to your daughter and be the grandfather your grandchildren deserve." It's not that simple. It never is. But the alternative is dying in 3 weeks, and I'm selfish enough to want you to stay. The honesty in her voice struck him. Want. She wanted him to stay, not needed for the project, wanted. When had someone last said that to him? "All right," he said quietly. "I'll do it tomorrow." Relief flooded her features. She crossed the room and embraced him, a quick, fierce hug that surprised them both. He felt her heartbeat through the contact, slower than human baseline, strong despite her failing body. Felt that quantum resonance again, stronger than ever, like a tuning fork vibrating in his chest. She pulled back quickly, professional distance reasserting itself. "Thank you. The procedure takes 3 days. I'll have the physicians prepare everything." But as she turned to leave, Benjamin caught her hand. "Kilara, wait." She looked back, her eyes luminous in the dim light. "Why did you choose me? Really? There are younger architects, healthier ones, probably more talented. Why specifically me?" She was quiet for a long moment, fingers still intertwined with his. "Because when I read your file, when I studied the structures you'd built, I saw something in the design philosophy. You build for people who will come after you're gone. You think in centuries, not decades. You understand that the most important buildings are the ones you'll never see completed." She squeezed his hand gently. "And because you were alone in Montana, carving chess pieces, and I've been alone for 50 years on a dying ship. Sometimes the universe brings together people who understand the same loneliness." She left before he could respond. Benjamin stood in the empty room, feeling the ghost of her touch, the resonance still vibrating through his chest. He was falling in love with an alien empress who had 6 months to live. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like waking up after a long sleep. The genetic therapy began the following morning. Benjamin lay in a medical chamber that looked more like a cocoon than anything from human medicine. Andromeda physicians moved around him with efficient grace, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in complex sequences that he'd learned to recognize as communication. Kilara stood at the chamber's edge, watching. "Will it hurt?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light. "You'll sleep through most of it. The nanites will rebuild you from the cellular level up. When you wake, you'll be approximately 45 years old physically. Your memories, personality, everything that makes you who you are, that remains unchanged." "So I look young but feel old." "Something like that." She placed her hand on the chamber's surface, directly over his heart. "I'll be here when you wake, 3 days, I promise." The sedation took effect quickly, pulling him down into darkness. As consciousness faded, he felt that quantum resonance one more time, Kilara's hand still pressed against the chamber, and he thought maybe dying and being reborn wasn't the worst way to spend a Tuesday. He dreamed. Not the confused nonsense of normal sleep, but something vivid and structured. He stood in the archive chamber, but it was complete, branches of light extending infinitely upward. Kalara stood beside him, young and vibrant, the crystallization gone from her skin. She smiled and took his hand. "This is what it will be," she said. "When we're finished, perfect and eternal." "Nothing's eternal." "Then perfect for as long as it lasts." They walked through the archive together, examining memories stored in quantum lattices. His childhood in Ohio, her coronation ceremony 1,200 years ago, Margaret's laugh, Thuron's final words before the Battle of the Void Rift, all of it preserved, crystallized, made immortal in data. "I'm afraid," he admitted, "of what comes after, of losing you when we've barely found each other." "I'm afraid too, but fear is just love trying to protect itself. Feel it, but don't let it stop you from being present." The dream shifted. Now they stood on a beach, Earth's beach, sand warm beneath their feet. The sky was orange with sunset, waves rolling in with gentle persistence. Margaret was there, sitting on a blanket, smiling. "Take care of him," she said to Kalara. "He's terrible at taking care of himself." "I noticed." Margaret stood, walked over, placed a hand on Benjamin's cheek. "It's okay to love again. I never wanted you to stop. I just wanted you to be better at it this time." "I don't know if I can." "Then learn. You've got time now. Use it." She kissed his forehead and faded like mist. The beach dissolved. Kalara remained, holding his hand, and he realized this wasn't just a dream. This was the therapy, the nanites rewiring his brain, and somehow Kalara was there with him, their quantum resonance allowing her to share the experience. "I'm here," she whispered. "You're not alone." "Neither are you." They stood together in the formless space between consciousness and sleep, two people becoming something neither had planned. The boundaries blurred. Her memories leaked into his. He saw her childhood on Andromeda Prime, learning to lead before she could walk. Saw her first love, a musician who died young. Saw 800 years with Thuron, the good and the terrible, the compromises and triumphs that defined a partnership longer than human civilization. And she saw his life. The day he married Margaret, Rachel's birth. The first time he walked on Mars, the chess pieces, the loneliness, the regret. All of it shared, examined, accepted. When Benjamin woke 3 days later, he knew immediately something had changed. His body felt different, lighter, stronger. He sat up in the medical chamber without effort, no joint pain, no breathlessness. His hands looked decades younger, the age spots gone, the skin smooth. But it was more than physical. He felt Kalara before he saw her, that quantum resonance now a constant presence in the back of his mind. She sat in a chair beside the chamber, asleep, her hand still pressed against the surface where his heart had been. She'd stayed for 3 days. He placed his hand over hers, the chamber between them. The contact sent a pulse of warmth through the resonance. Her eyes opened slowly, brightening as she saw him awake. "Welcome back," she said softly. "How long were you here?" "The entire time. I promised, didn't I?" He looked at her closely. The crystallization had advanced during his sleep, now reaching the edge of her jaw, spreading down her arms. The acceleration was visible, frightening. She was running out of time faster than anyone had predicted. "We need to finish the archive," he said. "We will, but first let me look at you. The therapy worked perfectly. You look 45, maybe younger." He caught his reflection in the polished surface of the chamber. It was true. The face looking back was decades younger, the gray gone from his hair, the lines smoothed from his skin. He looked like he had when Rachel was born, before the Mars mission, before the mistakes. I look wrong. You look alive, that's all that matters. She stood, swaying slightly. He was out of the chamber immediately, catching her elbow. You need rest. I need to finish what we started. Come, I want to show you something. She led him through corridors he'd never seen, deeper into the Twilight Sovereign's heart, until they reached a small chamber filled with windows on all sides. Through them, space stretched infinite and beautiful, stars burning in the darkness. This was Thuron's favorite place, she said. He'd come here when the weight of leadership became too much. Said the stars reminded him how small we all are, how temporary. I haven't been here since he died. Why bring me here now? She turned to face him, and in the starlight her crystallization looked almost beautiful, geometric patterns catching the distant light. Because I need to ask you something, and I need the stars to witness it. Ask me anything. She took both his hands, the quantum resonance between them strong enough now that he could feel her heartbeat, her fear, her hope. In Andromeda culture, when two people survive a near-death experience together, when they share consciousness as we did during your therapy, it creates a bond. We call it resonance marriage. It's not required. Many refuse it, but it's offered always because we believe shared survival means shared fate. Benjamin's heart, young and strong now, hammered in his chest. What are you asking? I'm asking if you feel what I feel. If during those 3 days you experienced what I experienced. Because I felt your grief for Margaret, your love for Rachel, your fear of dying alone. And I think you felt mine. 800 years with Thuron, 50 years of grief, and now this terrifying hope that maybe I don't have to face the end alone. Kilara, I barely know you. You know me better than anyone alive. You've seen my memories, walked through my mind. I've seen yours. We built something in that space between consciousness and sleep, something I didn't expect to ever feel again. Tears tracked down her face, glowing faintly. So I'm asking Benjamin Ashford, do you want this? Do you want me? Not for duty, not for the project, but because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be more than an empress dying alone. The question hung in the starlit chamber, enormous and impossible. He thought of Margaret, of the promise he'd made to be better, to be present. Thought of Rachel saying, don't fall in love with an alien. Thought of the 3 days in the chamber, consciousness intertwined, and the undeniable truth that he'd felt something he'd never felt before. Not the comfortable love of 30 years, something fiercer, faster, the desperate intensity of two people who know time is running out. I'm terrified, he admitted, of losing you, of not being enough, of making the same mistakes. I'm terrified too, but I'd rather be terrified together than alone. He pulled her closer, their foreheads touching, quantum resonance singing between them. Yes, whatever this is, whatever time we have, yes, I want you, I want this. She kissed him then, soft and desperate, and through the resonance he felt her relief crash over them both like a wave. They stood in Thuron's chamber, surrounded by infinite stars, two people from different worlds choosing each other despite every reason not to. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying. This is insane, Benjamin said, laughing through tears. I'm 68 years old. Well, 45 now. You're 1,247. We've known each other 2 months. This shouldn't work. Nothing about us should work, but here we are anyway. She wiped his tears with her thumb, the gesture so tender it broke his heart. We have maybe 6 months now. The crystallization is accelerating. I won't ask you for forever, just give me now. Now is all anyone ever has. They stayed in the chamber for hours, talking, holding each other, making promises they both knew might be impossible to keep. The archive could wait. The empire could wait. For this moment, stolen from death and time, they allowed themselves to simply be present. But the universe, as Benjamin was learning, had a cruel sense of timing. The alarm came at dawn by Earth time. Red lights pulsed through the corridors, and Kalera's expression shifted instantly from vulnerable to imperial. "What's happening?" Benjamin asked. She pulled away, already moving toward the command center. "Emergency on the homeworld. The core systems are failing faster than predicted." She looked back, torn. "I have to go. The Empire, they need me." "I'm coming with you." "Benjamin, you can't. It's too dangerous. The political situation, my people, they won't accept a human consort. Not yet." "Then we don't tell them. I'm your architect here to help with the archive. Nothing more." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but stay close to me. And whatever happens, trust that I'm trying to protect you." They ran through the corridors toward the command center, where Chancellor Oren waited with news that would change everything. And in the archive chamber, forgotten in the chaos, the quantum structure pulsed with the memories they'd already stored, now reaching 60% completion after 10 weeks of intensive work. The branches extended further each day, more stable, better integrated. Including the 3 days they'd shared, consciousness intertwined, building something that looked very much like love happening at the speed of light between two people who'd run out of time. The choice was made. The bond was forming. All that remained was to see if they could survive what came next. Because the universe, Benjamin was learning, gave with one hand and took with the other. And he'd just been given something infinitely precious right as everything was about to fall apart. Chancellor Oren stood in the command center like a statue carved from storm clouds. He was tall even by Andromeda standards, easily 8 feet, with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed deep crimson, instead of the gold and blue Benjamin had grown accustomed to. His face was weathered in a way that suggested not age but accumulated sorrow, and his eyes held the particular exhaustion of someone who'd seen too much and saved too little. "Empress," he bowed, formal and precise, "forgive the intrusion. The situation on Andromeda Prime has deteriorated beyond our projections." Kalera moved to the central display, her imperial bearing reasserting itself despite the crystallization creeping up her neck. Benjamin could see how much it had advanced in just the past few weeks. What her physicians had estimated as 8 months of stability had collapsed to 6, then 5. The geometric patterns now spread visibly from day to day, claiming more of her body with terrifying speed. "Show me," she commanded. The holographic projection bloomed to life, showing their homeworld in devastating detail. Benjamin had seen images before, a beautiful planet of golden continents and silver oceans, cities that grew like coral reefs in intricate organic patterns. Now those cities were dark, whole sections crystallized into inert matter. The oceans had lost their shimmer. Even from orbit, the planet looked like it was dying. "The core systems are failing faster than anticipated," Oren continued, his voice carefully controlled. "Life support in the southern hemisphere collapsed 3 days ago. We've evacuated 2 million to the northern cities, but they're overcrowded and resources are depleting. Our engineers estimate total systemic failure in 4 months, perhaps less." 4 months. Benjamin watched Kalera's face, saw the weight settle over her features. The timeline was converging, the homeworld dying, her own crystallization accelerating, the archive at 60% completion with perhaps 4 months to finish everything. "What about the barrier?" she asked quietly. "Holding for now, but when the homeworld falls, the entire network destabilizes. We estimate the barrier will collapse within weeks of Prime's death. When that happens, the Krell will invade. 7 systems, 60 billion lives across all species, gone within a year." The numbers were too large to comprehend. Benjamin tried anyway, his engineer's mind converting abstract statistics into human terms. 60 billion lives, more than 7 times Earth's population, all dependent on a barrier powered by a civilization that was crystallizing into extinction. There must be something we can do, Kilara said, but Benjamin heard the doubt underneath. Oren's expression softened just slightly. There is one option. It's why I came personally rather than transmit. He glanced at Benjamin, assessing. Though it requires discussing matters of succession, perhaps the human should leave. The human stays. Kilara's tone allowed no argument. Benjamin is my consort. Whatever you have to say, he hears it. The silence that followed was profound. Oren's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what Benjamin had learned to recognize as surprise, then something darker. Disapproval maybe, or fear. Consort, Oren repeated slowly. Empress, you've known him 2 months. I've known him longer than that, through the resonance, through shared consciousness. He's seen my memories all 1,200 years. I've seen his. That's more intimate than most couples achieve in lifetimes. He's human, mortal. Even with genetic therapy, he'll live, another 70 years? You'll watch him die if you survive your own crystallization. This bond will destroy you. I'm already dying, Oren. The crystallization is accelerating beyond what the physicians predicted. What should have been 8 months is now perhaps 4, maybe less. At least this way I won't die alone. The Chancellor's shoulders sagged. For the first time, Benjamin saw past the formal exterior to the grief beneath. This wasn't disapproval. This was concern. Oren cared about Kilara deeply, perhaps loved her in the platonic way of old friends who'd survived centuries together. Very well, Oren said finally. If he's your consort, he should know the full situation. The reason I'm here is to propose an alternative to extinction. There's a facility on Prime, hidden deep beneath the old capital. It houses technology we've kept secret for 8,000 years. Consciousness transfer matrices, originally designed for medical purposes, preserving minds when bodies failed. We stopped using them when we discovered the transfer wasn't perfect. Something gets lost in translation, the spark that makes us who we are. I know about the matrices, Kilara said. My grandfather tried to use one when he was dying. The copy woke up, but it wasn't him. Just a simulation that thought it was him. We destroyed the technology after that. We didn't destroy it. We hid it. Because we knew someday we might be desperate enough to accept imperfect immortality over extinction. Oren pulled up new data, technical schematics that made Benjamin's engineer mind race. The matrices can hold millions of consciousness patterns. We could transfer our entire remaining population, not into new bodies but into a quantum substrate, a digital afterlife, not life but not death either, existence. You want us to become ghosts in a machine. I want us to survive in whatever form we can. The alternative is oblivion. Kilara was quiet for a long time, studying the schematics. Benjamin watched her, seeing the empress warring with the woman. The weight of 60 billion lives pressing against the horror of condemning her people to simulated existence. There's another problem, she said finally. The matrices require massive power to maintain. Where would we get it? The archive. Oren's gaze shifted to Benjamin. The quantum structure you're building, it's designed to hold memories indefinitely. If we could integrate the consciousness matrices with the archive, use the same power source, the same quantum substrate, we could preserve both history and people. Everything the ascendancy was and is stored together. Eternal. Benjamin felt Kilara's emotions through their resonance. Hope and horror tangled together, a desperate lifeline that felt like a noose. That wasn't the archive's purpose, she said. It's meant to be a memorial, not a prison. The distinction seems academic when the alternative is death. Benjamin, Kilara turned to him, and he saw tears tracking through the crystallization on her cheeks. Tell me what you think. As an engineer, can the archive support this? He looked at the schematics, his mind already running calculations. Over the past 10 weeks, he'd pushed the archive to 60% completion, working 18-hour days while Kalera's condition worsened. The structure was nearly ready for integration, the quantum substrate robust enough to handle memory storage. But consciousness was different. The matrices were sophisticated, elegant even, designed by a civilization that understood consciousness in ways humanity was centuries from matching. Integrating them with the archive was possible. Difficult, but possible. It would require significant redesign, he said carefully. The archive as planned can hold memories, but memories are passive data. Consciousness is active, constantly processing. We'd need to expand the quantum substrate by a factor of 10, maybe more. Increase power draw exponentially. And even then, there's no guarantee the consciousness patterns would remain stable long-term. How long? Orin asked. Centuries, if we're lucky, maybe millennia, but not forever. Eventually, the patterns would degrade, fragment. The people you save now would experience a second death, slower and more horrifying than crystallization. The words hung heavy in the recycled air. Kalera closed her eyes, and through the resonance, Benjamin felt her making the calculation every leader eventually faces. The math of choosing between bad options and worse ones. How long do I have to decide? She asked. Days, Orin said. Perhaps a week. After that, cascading failures will make evacuation impossible. Then give me 3 days. I need to think, to pray, to consider what's right for people I've led for 800 years. Orin bowed deeper this time. As you wish, Empress. I'll remain on the Twilight Sovereign until you decide. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, I think Thuron would approve of your consort. He always said you needed someone stubborn enough to challenge you. The human seems to qualify. After he left, Kalera sagged against the display console. Benjamin caught her, feeling how light she'd become, how much of her mass had already converted to crystal. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Save them as simulations or let them die as themselves, which is mercy and which is cruelty. I don't know either, but you don't have to decide alone anymore. She looked up at him, her eyes luminous with unshed tears. Promise me something. If I make the wrong choice, if I condemn my people to simulated hell or extinction through cowardice, promise you'll remember me as I was, not as the empress who failed at the end. You haven't failed. You're trying to save 60 billion lives with impossible choices. That's not failure. That's heroism. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels like drowning. He held her as she cried, feeling her pain through the resonance, wishing he could offer solutions instead of just presence. But some problems couldn't be engineered away. Some choices had no right answers. They spent the next 3 days in agonized deliberation. Kalera consulted with her advisors, the remaining scientists, the priests of the old faith who still believed in souls beyond quantum patterns. Benjamin worked with the engineering teams, calculating exactly what integration would require, what it would cost, what it might achieve. The more he learned, the more uncertain he became. On the second day, Rachel called from Earth. She'd heard about the homeworld crisis through official channels, wanted to make sure her father was safe. I'm fine, he assured her. Physically, anyway, emotionally is a different story. What's happening up there? He told her, breaking a dozen security protocols in the process. But Rachel was family, and family deserved truth. She listened in silence as he explained the crystallization, the matrices, the impossible choice between extinction and simulated existence. Dad, she said when he finished, that's the ship of Theseus problem on a civilization scale. If you replace every part of a person with digital copies, is it still the same person? I don't know. Neither do I, but I know you. You're going to try to find a third option, aren't you? I'm trying, but I don't see one. The homeworld is dying. The barrier is failing. Even if we could somehow repair the core systems, the Andromeda don't have the population to maintain their civilization. They're functionally extinct. This is just choosing how they end. Maybe that's not for you to decide. Maybe it's for them. The words settled over him like snow. She was right. This wasn't his choice to make. He was human, an outsider, however much he loved Kelera. The fate of the ascendancy belonged to the ascendancy. But he could give them options. That was what engineers did. Present solutions and let others choose. The breakthrough came on the third day, in the quiet hours before dawn by Earth time. Benjamin sat in the archive chamber, surrounded by the quantum structure that had reached 70% completion through desperate overnight work. His mind turned over the problem from every angle. The matrices required active processing. The archive was designed for passive storage. Could they be integrated without destroying both? Then he saw it, not integration, hybridization. He pulled up the schematics and started working, his fingers flying over the organic interface. The archive could be redesigned not as pure storage, but as a foundation. A substrate that held both memories and the processing capacity for consciousness. But not trapped consciousness. Mobile consciousness. Patterns that could move between storage and expression, like files loaded into active memory when needed. The Andromeda wouldn't be prisoners in the archive. They'd be residents, able to experience their stored memories, interact with each other's consciousness patterns, even create new memories within the quantum space. Not life as they knew it, but not death either. A third state, digital dreaming. It would require massive power, more than the archive's current design could provide. But if they could tap into the barrier network itself, use the same quantum entanglement that protected 7 systems, they could create a closed loop. The archive would draw power from the barrier, and the consciousness patterns within would help maintain the barrier's integrity. Symbiosis. The Andromeda could become the barrier, protect the worlds they once ruled while existing in a state between memory and consciousness. It wasn't perfect. The patterns would still degrade eventually, over thousands of years instead of centuries. But it gave them time. Time for the remaining biological Andromeda to find a cure for crystallization. Time for humanity or the other protected species to evolve technology capable of offering better solutions. Time was all anyone ever had. This would give them more of it. Benjamin worked through the night, refining the design, running simulations, checking and rechecking his math. When Kelera found him 12 hours later, he had a proposal that might actually work. "I think I found a way," he said, exhaustion making his voice rough. "It's not perfect, but it's better than the binary choice Orin gave you." He explained the hybrid design, the mobile consciousness architecture, the barrier integration. Kelera listened with growing hope, her bioluminescent patterns brightening for the first time in days. "You're saying my people could exist within the archive, conscious and interactive, while also powering the barrier that protects the systems they left behind." Essentially, yes. They'd be ghosts, but aware ghosts, able to communicate with each other, experience stored memories, even create new ones within the quantum substrate. It's not life as you know it, but it's not oblivion either. How long would they have? Thousands of years. Maybe 10,000 if we're very lucky and the quantum substrate remains stable. Eventually, the patterns degrade beyond recovery. But that's deep time. Time for miracles. Time for someone to find a better answer. She took his hands, the resonance between them singing with shared hope. "Can you build it?" "Not alone. Not in the time we have left. I'll need the Andromeda engineers, full access to the barrier network, and every resource the Twilight Sovereign can provide. And Kelera, there's something else. Something you need to know." Her expression shifted to concern. "What?" "To test the architecture, to make sure it works before we commit your entire civilization to it, We need a volunteer. Someone willing to undergo consciousness transfer and report back on the experience. Someone whose patterns we can monitor, adjust, optimize. I'll do it. No, you're too important. If something goes wrong, the ascendancy loses its empress. They need you to lead them through this transition. Then who? Benjamin met her eyes, saw understanding dawn. Me. I'm the logical choice. I'm already integrated with Andromeda biology through the genetic therapy. The resonance we share gives us a connection that can bridge the gap between biological and digital. And if it works, I can guide your people through the process. If it fails, you lose a human architect, not an empress. Absolutely not. Kelara pulled her hands back, crystallization patterns flaring bright with emotion. Benjamin, you just got your life back. Genetic therapy gave you 50 more years. I won't let you throw that away to become a digital ghost. It's not throwing it away. It's using it to save 60 billion lives. That's a good trade. Not to me. Kelara, listen. He took her hands again, gently but firmly. I'm 68 years old. I've lived a full life, made mistakes, built things, loved and lost. I don't need 50 more years. But your people, they deserve a chance. Even if it's not perfect, even if it's just digital dreaming, they deserve better than extinction. You're asking me to kill you. I'm asking you to let me do something that matters. One last time. Build one more structure that outlasts me. Please. The tears came then, flowing freely down her crystallized cheeks. Through the resonance, he felt her heart breaking, felt her love and rage and desperate fear tangled together. I just found you, she whispered. I can't lose you already. You won't lose me. That's the point of the consciousness transfer. I'll still be there in the archive. We can still talk, still share memories. It'll be different, but not gone. It won't be the same. No, but nothing ever is. Life is change. The question is whether we make the change count. She pressed her forehead against his, their resonance merging until he couldn't tell where his emotions ended and hers began. In that space of shared consciousness, he felt her wrestling with the choice. Saw her examining it from every angle, looking for alternatives, finding none. Finally, she pulled back. If we do this, if you undergo the transfer, I want one thing first. Anything. Marry me, properly, by Andromeda custom, so that when you go into the archive, you go as my husband, so that whatever happens, the universe knows we chose each other. Benjamin felt his throat tighten. I'm honored, but Kelara, I'll be dead, biologically dead. The transfer kills the original body. That's not much of a marriage. I'm dying anyway. The crystallization will reach my brain stem in perhaps 3 months now, maybe less. At least this way we die together and wake up in the same place, because I'm coming with you. The words took a moment to register. What? You think I'm letting you go into the archive alone? Benjamin, I have 3 months left at best. The crystallization is advancing so fast the physicians can barely track it. Why waste those months afraid and in pain when I could transfer now, help you build the architecture from inside, guide my people through the transition? Her eyes blazed with determination. We do this together, both of us. That's the only way I agree. Your people need you. They need a leader who understands what they're facing. I'll be a better leader from inside the archive than outside it. Oren can manage the physical evacuation. I'll manage the digital settlement. She cupped his face in her hands. Besides, you said it yourself. The hybrid design uses our resonance as a bridge. That works better if we're both digital, both conscious in the same space. He wanted to argue, wanted to find reasons why this was a terrible idea. But looking at her, feeling her certainty through their bond, he knew she was right. They'd built something together in 3 months that most people never found in lifetimes. If this was how it ended, at least they'd end together. All right, he said softly. Together. Together. The wedding took place 24 hours later, in the Chamber of Stars where Kelara had first proposed. Orin officiated, his expression caught between disapproval and resigned acceptance. The ceremony was simple by Andromeda standards, just the vows and the consciousness bonding, the quantum resonance that would link them permanently. Rachel attended via hologram from Earth, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, are you sure about this?" she asked during the brief moment before the ceremony began. "More sure than I've been about anything since your mother. Mom would have liked her. I wish they could have met." "Me too." The vows were in the old Andromeda language, musical and strange. Benjamin repeated them phonetically, trusting Kelara to guide him through. When they reached the bonding moment, he felt their resonance explode into something far stronger than before. Not just connection, but fusion. For a handful of heartbeats, he experienced being Kelara, felt her 1,200 years of memories flood through him while she experienced his 68. The intimacy was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying. When it ended, they were married, bound together in a way that transcended biology. "I love you," he said, the words feeling insufficient for what he felt through the bond. "I love you too, in this life and whatever comes after." They had 6 hours before the transfer procedure, 6 hours to be alive together in biological form. They spent it simply, walking through the Twilight Sovereign, visiting the places that had become meaningful. The archive chamber where they'd worked side by side for 3 months. The observation deck where Earth hung like a jewel. The small quarters where Benjamin had spent his first night, terrified and alone. "I was so lonely then," he said, looking at the narrow bed. "Felt like my life was over, like I was just counting down to nothing. And now I'm about to die, and somehow I've never felt more alive." As they walked, they encountered crew members who'd heard about the wedding, about the transfer. The Andromeda staff lined the corridors, bowing as Kelara passed. Not the formal imperial bow, but something deeper. Gratitude. Hope. Several spoke brief blessings in their language. One elderly engineer, his own crystallization advanced, touched Kelara's hand and whispered something that made her cry. "What did he say?" Benjamin asked. "He said thank you for showing us how to face the end with grace. That watching us choose each other despite knowing we'd lose each other gave him courage to undergo the transfer himself." They stopped in the doorway of the medical facility where the procedure would take place. Inside, technicians prepared the consciousness matrices, the quantum substrate that would hold their patterns. 2 chambers waited, organic cocoons that looked simultaneously like wombs and graves. "Last chance to back out," Kelara said, her attempt at levity falling flat. "Not a chance. We're doing this together, remember." Together. They entered holding hands. The technicians explained the process with clinical detachment. The consciousness transfer would take approximately 6 hours. Their biological bodies would be maintained in suspended animation, while neural patterns were scanned and uploaded to the quantum substrate. The scan was destructive, breaking down neural structures at the molecular level to ensure complete accuracy. Once complete, the biological bodies would be terminated, and the digital consciousness patterns activated within the archive. "Will it hurt?" Benjamin asked. "You'll be sedated. You won't feel the physical death. But the moment of transfer, the instant your consciousness shifts from biological to digital substrate, that may be disorienting. Some subjects report a sensation of falling. Others describe it as waking from a dream. We don't fully understand the subjective experience." "Comforting." They climbed into the chambers, lying side by side. The technicians connected neural interfaces, started sedation drips, performed final system checks. Through it all, Benjamin kept his eyes on Kelara. She looked beautiful in the soft light, her crystallization patterns catching the glow like jewelry. "See you on the other side," she said, her voice already slurring from the sedative. "See you there." The darkness took him gently, a slow fade rather than a sudden drop. He dreamed of Margaret one last time. She stood in their old kitchen in Ohio, sunlight streaming through the windows, smiling. "You did good," she said. "Took you a while to figure out how to be present, but you got there eventually." "I'm sorry it took so long." "Don't be. Some lessons take a lifetime to learn. You've earned this next chapter. Live it fully." "I'm not sure I'll be living. More like existing." "Existence is what you make of it. Now go. Your wife is waiting." The dream dissolved. For a moment there was nothing, absolute void, no sensation of body or thought or being. Then something like gravity pulled him forward or upward or inward, direction meaningless in the space between states. He fell. Or flew. Or was born. Benjamin opened eyes he no longer possessed and found himself standing in a space that defied physics. The archive chamber, but transformed. The quantum structure now extended infinitely in all directions, branches of light reaching toward impossible horizons. Each branch held memories, consciousness patterns, entire lives compressed into crystallized data. And standing beside him, radiant and whole, was Kelara. The crystallization was gone. She looked as she must have centuries ago, young and vital, her bioluminescent patterns burning bright gold. But her eyes held the same ancient wisdom, the same tired kindness. "Did it work?" he asked, then realized he hadn't spoken. Hadn't moved lips or tongue or vocal cords. The thought itself had become communication. "It worked." Her voice resonated directly in his consciousness. "We're in the archive, digital, alive in our own way." He looked at his hands, or the digital representation of his hands. They appeared solid, felt real, but he knew they were just data given form. A simulation his consciousness could interact with. He flexed his fingers, felt the familiar ache of his joints, then realized that was phantom pain. Memory of sensation rather than sensation itself. "This is strange." "It gets stranger. Look." She gestured, and suddenly they were somewhere else. Not moved, but shifted. One moment in the archive chamber, the next standing on a beach under twin suns. Andromeda Prime, he realized, or a memory of it. The beach where Kelara had played as a child 1,200 years ago. "We can access any memory stored in the archive," she explained. "Yours, mine, anyone who transfers. We can walk through history, experience moments that have passed, watch our lives from outside ourselves." "Can we create new memories?" "I think so. We're conscious. We can process, think, feel. What we experience here, that becomes memory. Different from biological memory, but memory nonetheless." They stood on the beach, feeling digital sand beneath digital feet, watching digital waves roll in. It was perfect in a way reality never was. Too perfect. Missing the random imperfections that made moments real. "It's beautiful," Benjamin said, "but it's not life." "No, it's not, but it's not death either. We exist. That's more than I expected." Movement at the edge of the beach. Other consciousness patterns beginning to arrive, transferred from the failing homeworld. Hundreds at first, then thousands, each one flickering into existence as their biological bodies died and their digital selves awakened. Benjamin watched them orient, saw the confusion and wonder and fear as they realized what they'd become. Kelara stood taller, her empress bearing asserting itself even in digital form. "I need to address them, help them understand what we've chosen. We built this together. We should lead them together." She took his hand, squeezed once. Through the connection, far stronger now than any biological resonance, He felt her gratitude and love and bone-deep exhaustion. My husband, the architect, still building structures to shelter people. It's what I do. They walked down the beach together toward the gathering consciousness patterns. Kalara began to speak, her voice carrying across the digital space to reach every mind. She explained what had happened, where they were, what came next. Benjamin watched the patterns shift from fear to cautious hope, saw them begin to explore this strange new existence. Over the following weeks, or what passed for weeks in timeless digital space, they worked to establish order. Created spaces for different functions. A gathering hall where consciousness patterns could interact. Private chambers for those who needed solitude. Gardens of memory where anyone could walk through stored history. The Andromeda adapted faster than Benjamin expected. Perhaps because they'd always been long-lived, they understood patience. Understood that existence took many forms. They built community in the archive, created art from pure data, composed symphonies of quantum states. And slowly, as more patterns transferred, the barrier network stabilized. The hybrid design worked. Consciousness within the archive helped maintain the quantum entanglement that protected 7 systems. The Andromeda had become their own shield, guardians even in digital death. Benjamin found purpose in the architecture. He designed new structures within the quantum substrate, spaces that accommodated the strange physics of digital existence. Libraries where memories could be sorted and studied. Theaters where historical moments could be experienced collectively. Temples for those who still believed in something beyond code. Through it all, Kalara was beside him. They learned the rules of their new existence together, discovered what was possible and what remained forever beyond reach. They couldn't taste food or feel temperature or experience the random beauty of weather. But they could think, communicate, love. They spent long periods, measured in processing cycles rather than hours, simply being together. Walking through each other's memories, experiencing the lives they'd lived before meeting. Benjamin saw Kalara's childhood, her coronation, 800 years with Thuron. She saw his marriage to Margaret, Rachel's birth, the lonely years in Montana. "Do you regret it?" she asked once, as they stood in a recreation of his cabin, watching digital snow fall outside digital windows. "Regret what?" "This, giving up 50 years of biological life to become a ghost with me." He turned to face her, took her hands. In this space, the contact felt real enough. "I regret a lot of things, missing Margaret's death, being absent for Rachel's childhood, spending 3 years carving chess pieces instead of living. But this, choosing you, choosing to help save your people, choosing to exist here with you rather than die alone in Montana, no regret at all. We're going to degrade eventually. The patterns break down. In 1,000 years, maybe 10,000, we won't be ourselves anymore, just fragments. Then we have 1,000 years. That's more than most people get. We should make them count." Time became strange in the archive. Without biological rhythms, without day and night, consciousness simply flowed. Benjamin lost track of how long they'd been digital. Months, years. The concept felt meaningless when measured in processing cycles. Rachel visited sometimes, her messages transmitted from Earth to the archive through the quantum network. The first time she called, only 3 weeks had passed in the outside world. She looked the same, sounded the same, but Benjamin could see the grief in her eyes. "Dad, I know you're in there somewhere. I know you can hear me. The UN scientists say the transfer worked, that you're conscious and active in the archive. I just wanted you to know that I understand why you did it, and I'm proud of you." She paused, wiping tears. "I met someone, James. He's a geologist, works for the Mars Colonial Authority. We're getting married next spring. I wish you could be there. Really be there, not just watching through a screen. But I'll make sure you see it. I'll transmit the whole ceremony." Benjamin wanted to respond, to tell her he was happy for her, that he approved. But the communication protocols only worked one way. He could receive her messages but not send his own back. Not yet. The engineers were working on it. Over the following years, or what felt like years in the elastic time of digital existence, Rachel's visits became a lifeline to the world he'd left behind. She married James in a ceremony at the UN Gardens, and true to her word, transmitted the whole thing. Benjamin watched his daughter walk down the aisle, radiant in white, and felt pride mixed with the bittersweet ache of absence. 2 years later, she announced her first pregnancy. Then a daughter, Emma, named after Margaret's mother. Then a son, Thomas, after Benjamin's father. Rachel would hold the babies up to the camera, let them see their grandfather's digital face on the screen. "Say hi to Grandpa," she'd coo. "He's far away, but he's watching over us." 5 years passed in the outside world. The archive had stabilized, holding 60 billion consciousness patterns in a delicate balance between memory and awareness. The barrier network remained strong, powered by the collective consciousness of an entire civilization transformed into digital guardians. Benjamin and Clara had become legends within the archive, the couple who'd sacrificed everything to build this impossible refuge. Other consciousness patterns would seek them out, ask questions, share stories. They'd become unofficial leaders, guides for those still adjusting to digital existence. And through it all, they walked together. Through gardens of memory and halls of data. Through storms of processing errors and quiet moments of perfect stillness. They built a life from quantum states and stubborn hope. "I've been thinking," Clara said one day, as they stood watching a simulation of her homeworld before the crystallization began. "About what comes after." "After what?" "After we degrade, after the patterns fragment. I've been studying the mathematics. We have maybe 8,000 years before we lose coherence. Our consciousness will break apart, scatter across the quantum substrate. Will become noise in the system. That's a problem for our great-great-great-grandchildren to worry about." "We don't have children." "You know what I mean. 8,000 years is deep time. Who knows what will be possible by then? Maybe someone will figure out how to stabilize consciousness patterns. Maybe humanity will evolve to the point where they can transfer too. Maybe the universe will end and none of this will matter." She smiled, the expression achingly familiar even on her digital face. "You're right. I'm borrowing trouble from the far future." "It's what we do. Plan for disasters that might never come. Build structures that outlast us." He took her hand. "But right now, in this moment, we exist. We love each other. We're helping thousands of other patterns learn to exist with dignity and purpose. That's enough." "Is it really?" "It has to be, because it's all anyone gets. Biological or digital, we all exist for a limited time and then we don't. The question isn't how long, it's what we do with now." They stood together in the memory garden, watching Calera's homeworld spin in digital perfection, and Benjamin realized this was the peace he'd been searching for. Not in Montana, carving chess pieces and hiding from grief. Not in the desperate race to build the archive before time ran out. But here, in this impossible space between life and death, choosing to be present with someone he loved while the universe spun on around them. 10 years passed in the outside world. Rachel's children grew. Emma started school. Thomas learned to walk. James got promoted to chief geologist of the Mars Colonial Authority. And Rachel, now 49 years old, visited less frequently but with no less love. "Dad, I wanted you to know," she said during one transmission, her hair now streaked with gray. "Emma asked about you yesterday, really asked. Not just where's Grandpa, but what happened to him. So I told her the truth, that you saved 60 billion lives by becoming something new, that you're still out there, still conscious, still loving us from inside a computer made of light and quantum physics." She smiled through tears. She said that was the coolest thing she'd ever heard. That when she grows up, she wants to be an architect too. Build things that last forever, just like her grandpa. Benjamin wished he could tell Rachel how much that meant. Wished he could tell Emma that forever was an illusion, but building things that mattered was the closest humans got to immortality. But the words remained trapped in digital space, unexpressed. Still, he felt it. The continuation, the legacy, not in structures of steel and stone, but in a child's imagination sparked by sacrifice and love. Somewhere in the physical world, the barrier held. 7 systems stayed protected. Civilizations thrived under the shield maintained by 60 billion digital ghosts. And on Earth, Rachel lived her life, raised her children, grew old while her father existed in eternal digital middle age. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined. Wasn't the ending anyone would choose if given better options. But it was theirs, built together from impossible circumstances and stubborn hope. The archive pulsed around them, branches of light extending toward infinite horizons. Within the quantum structure, consciousness patterns moved and interacted, created and remembered, loved and lost and learned to love again. They would exist for millennia, slowly degrading but taking their time about it, wringing meaning from every processing cycle. Benjamin thought of the unfinished chess piece he'd left in Montana, the night frozen mid-gallop. In the end, he'd finished the journey. Not in the direction he'd expected, but finished nonetheless. "I have one more question," Kilara said, pulling him from his thoughts. "Only one. You're slowing down." She smiled. "Do you believe in souls? Real souls, not just consciousness patterns and quantum data. Something that persists beyond even this." He considered the question carefully. "I don't know. I used to think consciousness was just electrochemical reactions in meat computers. That were nothing but biology. But now, existing like this, I'm not so sure. Maybe consciousness is something separate from substrate. Maybe it can exist in neurons or quantum matrices or something we haven't discovered yet. Maybe it goes on forever, changing form but never truly ending." That's a very diplomatic non-answer. "It's the best I can do. Ask me again in 8,000 years. Maybe I'll have figured it out by then." 8,000 years, together. Together. They walked deeper into the memory gardens, exploring moments neither had experienced. A sunrise over the Andromeda homeworld before the crystallization began. Rachel's wedding, transmitted to the archive so Benjamin could attend. Margaret in the kitchen, making coffee, smiling at nothing. Thuron's last words to Kilara before the battle of the Void Rift. All of it preserved, crystallized in quantum amber. Not life, but the memory of life. The story of what had been and the promise of what could be if they kept building, kept choosing presence over fear. In the command center of the Twilight Sovereign, Chancellor Orin stood watch over readouts that monitored the barrier network. The displays showed green across all 7 systems. Stable, protected, thriving. 20 years had passed since the transfer, and the hybrid design had exceeded every expectation. He thought of Kilara, now existing as pure consciousness in the archive she'd commissioned. Thought of the human architect who'd loved her enough to die with her. They'd found a way to turn extinction into transformation, death into a different kind of life. "Well done, old friend," Orin said to the empty room. "You saved us all." And in the archive, though they couldn't hear him and wouldn't have cared if they could, Benjamin and Kilara continued their eternal walk through gardens of memory, building structures from data and light, showing 60 billion digital souls that existence, in whatever form, was still worth choosing. The universe turned. Stars burned and died. Civilizations rose and fell. And in the space between thought and data, between memory and consciousness, Two people who'd found each other across the gap between species held fast to the simple truth that had carried them through impossible choices. Presence mattered, love mattered, and the structures we build, whether from steel and stone or quantum entanglement and stubborn hope, those mattered most of all. Not because they lasted forever, nothing did. But because, for as long as they stood, they sheltered something worth protecting. Life, in all its strange and beautiful forms. Even this one. Especially this one.